Greetings, everybody in the scientific research community, particularly the rejuvenation therapy / anti-aging medicine fields. I guess the purpose of this video today is to kind of clarify what's going on, and I've really come to a decision regarding the research, and I thought I would take the time and explain pretty much everything. So first of all, obviously it has been absolutely ridiculous with this whole fiasco. I know a lot of you are probably wondering, you know, hey, I donated this money, like, what was it, like 2 years ago now, and almost nothing's been done. What the heck is going on? This guy seems to be just languishing, like flopping around like a fish out of water, not getting anywhere. So, I mean, number one, yeah, there's been some technical difficulties, and we're trying to work around my wife's schedule and get an appropriate amount of time to do the research with the worms and all this stuff, and la-di-da, and then setting up the lab. We've had problems with contamination. Every time I get started, you know, it's like the contamination problems are so bad I can't do a practical experiment. And so we keep trying different places to do it. And right now I'm in the lab that we have set up. We completely cleared out our bedroom to set up a lab. But that's not just it. You know, I'm sure there's probably every step of the way there's some way I could have just done it and got things to work and done something and done some experiments and just swept this thing under the rug. But I guess being the kind of person I am, I don't work that way. I have to really believe in what I'm doing and believe that it's the best thing for me to be doing at a given time. You know, if I've got this objective, like in this case, to extend lifespan, or at least to live the lifespan that we can, you know, do the most we can to optimize our lifespan and optimize our life while we're living during that lifespan. If that's my goal, I really have to believe that I'm following the course of action, the direction of research that I believe is really going to get somewhere and have some results, and is the most likely, based upon everything I know, to get some results and to be the most productive use of my time. And basically what has happened for me is that about 1.5 years ago, I had a sequence of events that happened that really led me to believe that this avenue of therapy was not going to be the most effective that we could pursue, and particularly that there were other avenues of therapy that would be more immediately effective on us humans, you know, let alone little tiny microscopic lab animals and things. That there were other therapies that could be more immediately used by us that would have a greater impact, and that were addressing a more immediate problem when it comes to the whole aging phenomenon. So that's really been my quandary. Is there's been basically the wind that was in my sails to drive me along this direction of zapping pigments, aging pigments within cells, and seeing if there were rejuvenating effects. All that wind in my sails that was behind me has kind of evaporated. And so that, of course, begs the question, what is this other avenue of research, and what do I plan on doing about it? What's the way ahead? You know, and so the real change of thought I've had recently in the last day or so has been, you know, I finally came to terms with the whole thing and said, look, I'm really not doing the best, you know, doing you people who have donated money to really conquer the aging problem. I'm not doing you right. I'm not fulfilling my obligation to do my best to conquer the aging problem if I really do just continue along this line that I originally had planned like 2.5+ years ago. I've learned a lot since then, and that's the point. And I know similar things to this happen in science a lot. And often a researcher feels like his hands are tied. So, you know, if you got this big grant to do, you know, like a 3-year or 5-year grant to do this particular project, and then all of a sudden you find out there's something that means the whole project you had planned was going to be practically a waste of time, and there's really this whole other avenue that is going to be much more effective. Well, I'm sure there are options that a scientist has. And of course, one of those would be to just finish the bloody 3-year or 5-year project, or, you know, get enough grad students to work on it, whatever, and then sure, move off and do your other thing. And you will see that scientists running large labs and heading different directions and working on different avenues. But this is a little bit different deal. You know, this isn't me with a huge lab. This is just me with my time. And I guess what I thought of before was, well, you know, we had this money to do this project. I should just do the project and be done with it. And if I want to do some other project, then I should like do a proposal down the road and blah, blah, blah. But I guess that when it comes down to it, I don't work that way. I thought I did. I thought I could have enough energy to just pursue the project and get it done with. But I think what it really boils down to, and the reason why this is dragging out all this time and I'm never getting anything done, is that I do not have the motivation to waste even 4 months of my time, even if I had it full time, to pursue this when I don't think it's, you know, I think it's a rabbit trail. I don't think it's the road that's going to lead us to effective rejuvenation therapies, especially in the near term. I think that it is a potentially effective sub-therapy, side additional therapy that could be used to augment certain aspects of aging. But as far as addressing the real problem, and I've talked to a lot of you people that are in the rejuvenation research community and things, and from a lot of people I get this sense of urgency. You know, it seems like especially the people that are like, you know, 60 years plus. And a lot of you seem to give me this impression that it's like, hey, you know, the clock is running, I've only got a certain amount of time, and I may have already passed this point of no return. You know, and you hear the same kind of thing from Aubrey de Grey. You know, he was pushing for at first it was just like, you know, it's going to happen in 10 years. In 10 years we're going to get over the hump and we'll give ourselves enough time to discover more and blah, blah, blah. And it seems like there's this sense of urgency that keeps building. And I think justifiably so, there should be. Because for many of us, and for an ever-increasing number of us, it's got to be something that's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years and be relatively effective, or we're going to be out of the game, or we're going to be out of the game not too long after that, and it's going to be other people's, you know, the younger generation's baby, and they're going to be the ones that have to pursue. You know, so for a lot of us, I think there is this sense of urgency that's going to, and that's just going to increase as time goes on. So, at least the way I personally feel is, hey, if you know, we've got to go out there and do everything we can to find the most effective means we can to do what we can, what is possible to address the aging issue, to pursue rejuvenation therapy, to improve the human condition and improve our quality of life throughout the lifespan, and get that lifespan to be as long as it can be practically. You know, given the resources at our disposal, given what is possible biologically at this point in time or the near future or whatever. So that's what I've really come to, that, okay, there's a much better avenue to be pursuing, and I just cannot, with a clear conscience, waste effort, time, and money pursuing a rabbit trail that I think is far inferior to other things we could be doing. So, if this was all just based on normal legwork and research and hard scientific data and stuff, then I would have probably come forward with this whole thing a long time ago. But, of course, as most of you know, probably, there isn't a lot of hard research and scientific data on a lot of these subjects regarding rejuvenation therapy, and a large to a large degree, the reason for that, of course, is that a lot of scientists don't even believe that that's a worthy pursuit or a possible pursuit. You know, there's this culture in science where we have these ideas about what's possible and what's not, and if things get written off fairly early in the game, such things as rejuvenation is possible, well, then the blinders go up and you get this, you know, group mentality thing, where this herd mentality, where everybody's following these a few scientific leaders with the blinders on, with a certain mindset that here's what's possible, here's what's not. And, you know, that does make sense. We have to make responsible decisions as people funding research or as researchers about what's a waste of time, what's not. If there's been compelling evidence that certain things are obviously groundless and they're never going to work, well, we shouldn't waste time on them. But as a lot of people in this community would very quickly point out, there hasn't been evidence that rejuvenation is not possible. In fact, there's been a lot of compelling evidence to the contrary. I mean, heck, some of the best evidence is organisms that are known to not physically age, not alter with time at all, like certain sponges and things like that, or cell lines that can perpetuate indefinitely. You know, cancer cells and things that never age. They just, you know, they'll keep reproducing willy-nilly, and so there's lots of compelling evidence that a limited lifespan isn't a biological necessity per se. So for people, I guess what it boils down to is for people that are more open-minded and that are looking for what is possible, period, realistically, realizing that we don't know the whole story. And I guess it takes people that have a greater appreciation for what we do not know scientifically. And it's easy to get this mentality that, oh yeah, we've got 99.9% of this whole thing nailed down as far as how the laws of physics work and how science works and biology and matter and energy and life and everything, when in reality, I think it's closer to we know like 0.01%, and we've got 99.99% to discover yet. And I'm sure there are people that are everywhere in between, and reality is probably somewhere in between there. But obviously, there is so much that we don't know. It is ludicrous to claim that in the absence of stark, compelling evidence, it's ludicrous to claim that a whole line of therapies, such as rejuvenation therapies or research, is not possible simply because of tradition, beliefs, or a certain dogmatic type ideological mindset that may have a strong grip on the mainstream scientific community. So, what is this other avenue of research? And I guess to understand that, and to understand how I got there, first of all, you have to understand where I got the first ideas in the first place. This whole idea of using lasers to zap pigments and stuff. And no, it wasn't something that just, you know, popped out of the blue. And that is an interesting story. And so get a cup of coffee, sit down, it's going to take a while. So, the whole idea to use, I guess the more general idea, to use electromagnetic radiation of some type to extend lifespan actually came from, the first time I ran across the idea is in a psychic reading by the deep trance clairvoyant Edgar Cayce. And he was claiming that in ancient Atlantis there were these therapies they had using this crystal that modified solar energy and was used therapeutically to radically extend lifespan. And in his readings there was just some scant information, but there was enough to be compelling. And so what I did at that point was just took that general idea. So at that point it was, regardless of the source or where the idea came from, it was no different really than just some hunch that anyone would have, any scientist would have, to try a few things and maybe look into literature and just, you have an idea, you have an inspiration. So that was the source of my inspiration, I guess, was that reading from Edgar Cayce. And I'll put links to that reading, or probably the text to it and everything. I'll try to do everything I mentioned here. I'll try to give you some links to follow, or you can go read up on it and see what I'm talking about. But, so that was it. It was just a source of inspiration, this general concept that you could use some type of electromagnetic radiation. It wasn't exactly clear what type, because even if you have like a laser or something that's solar pumped, the solar spectrum is extremely broad, and you don't really know which part of that spectrum they're enhancing with a crystal laser. So, but even though Cayce didn't mention the word laser, just reading, knowing enough, it was easy to kind of drill down to what was going on. Because I started reading up on the whole thing, and I find out, yes, there are crystal lasers. Yes, it is possible to basically dope your crystal with the right material that will make it a good lasing medium, and also the crystal can have the reflective surfaces internally, which you need to create a optical or solar, what am I trying to say, a cavity, reflective cavity where the light can bounce back and forth, which is another requirement for a laser. And what you end up getting is you'll get the stimulated emission from your doping agent within the crystals. Once your intensity of light bouncing back and forth that keeps amplifying, collecting, will get great enough, then you'll get stimulated emission, and boom, you've got a laser just from nothing but a doped crystal that's constructed correctly, and a pumping source, which could be something as simple as solar energy, as sunlight. And as I read up more, yes, there were such things as solar pumped lasers, or just solar lasers, and it had been demonstrated to be possible to make such things, and they did work. So that was kind of all we had to go on, and I'm thinking, well, okay, so if it's going to be a therapy that can be used throughout the body, presumably there's some kind of malady throughout the entire system that would be contributing to aging, well, you would have to have some frequencies of solar energy to permeate the whole body. Well, that would kind of eliminate the visible spectrum, because obviously visible light doesn't travel clear through the body very well. And what's left? Well, you have ionizing radiation, like, from hard UV on up to higher frequencies, and then you've got infrared radiation, down, there's basically a range in the infrared where the electromagnetic radiation will penetrate quite deeply until you get down to like 3,000 nanometers or whatever, and wavelength, and those wavelengths will get absorbed by water very readily. But up above that, there's kind of this window. But anyway, so the first thing I knew about initially was ionizing radiation, so I pursued that first, and I was looking at, how could ionizing radiation possibly be used to affect therapies? And I discovered the works of T.D. Luckey and his radiation hormesis, where they were giving small doses of radiation to organisms that would really beef up their antioxidant response, and increase their average lifespan, of a population. Average lifespans would go way up, and the effects would last for generations. And it really seemed to be some good stuff, although the key thing is I couldn't find anything that would promote long-term, extend the maximum lifespan in mice. It just helped more of them to live longer and live a greater quality of life. But, I figured it was something. But so that kind of led me down this road, and when I first got into grad school in the life sciences, that's what I was doing as kind of my side project, was using gamma radiation to irradiate worms, because that was the model that we had that was easy to work with, and see if we could affect their lifespan. And, that was going on for a while, and I kept doing more and more research, and I found out that the Argonne National Laboratory outside of Chicago, or in Illinois, wherever that was, or is, back in like the 50s or something, they did a whole battery of research exhaustively analyzing the effects of radiation on mice. And they tried almost every conceivable possible regimen, and by that time I'd kind of arrived at an optimal regimen that I thought would be the best at producing radiation hormesis. And they had actually tried almost an identical dosing regimen with the exact level of radiation I thought would be the most therapeutic, and the exact periods, like daily or every other day or something, throughout the entire lifespan. And what was interesting is in that whole line of experiments, and I'll try to dredge up the paper on that too, that whole line of experiments, they found it to be, across the board, it was harmful to the mice, and they all died early. And that was what I would figure would be the most effective at getting a long-term extension of maximum lifespan. And T.D. Luckey had already done everything else, where he tried just very low doses continuously and over all possible lifespans. And he had pretty much established that all you could do was extend the average lifespan in the population, no extension of maximum longevity. Well, so it seemed like after I'd gotten a year or two into it, it seemed like that was it. That's what you could do with ionizing radiation, and aside from just cause cancer, which was always the fine line you were walking anyway. And so the wind was kind of out of my sails. So I went back to the drawing board. I'm like, okay, if there was anything to this guy and to this reading, did I miss something? So I took one last look, went back to the reading. It's the first time I'd read it in like a year or more. And after I'd done all this research into lasers and all these other things, and reading what he had read, it suddenly became very clear that what he was talking about was infrared. He kept talking about heat and how it was called the firestone, and the type of electromagnetic radiation that causes heat, that we call heat waves, or that generates heat, like from a heat lamp or things like that, is infrared radiation. It's in the infrared range. And so I redid the whole thinking, and had another guy, a friend of mine, John Teagan. We knocked ideas back and forth for a good month or two, going over all the things we could possibly find on crystals and lasers and infrared radiation, and all the readings we could possibly find by this guy, Edgar Cayce, and whatever other sources we could bring to bear, and just anything, And the best we could come up with was there was some type of therapy using an infrared laser. And so I started scouring PubMed and the legit research that had been done for any type of use of infrared lasers or lasers in general, in any kind of optical or infrared range, whatever. And I stumbled upon this whole the founding paper on selective photothermolysis, and for the moment the guy's name escapes me, but I'll put the link to that paper up there too. And I've talked about this before, because when I gave my presentation at the conference in LA, that was what the big thing, was this whole idea of selective photothermolysis. And basically what that was a theory establishing how existing therapies already worked, because they had these therapies they were using in ophthalmology, using like infrared lasers or lasers of in the visible spectrum that were pulsed and things like that. They already had these therapies they knew worked, that treated things like macular degeneration or whatever. They just didn't know really how they worked. And the selective photothermolysis was like one of the first papers where he really established the theory and the groundwork for how it could work and the mechanism and what would really be going on. And what that was all about was destroying lipofuscin-like pigments in cells that were causing those cells to malfunction, basically. And he showed that basically you could use pulsed light to selectively heat targets of different size and density, depending upon your parameters, how long your pulses were, your intensity, and the frequency, and all this stuff. So that really got me going, and that was the whole foundation. And of course, there's been tons of other papers that were related, and so I had all this research that was existing that was behind this whole concept of selective photothermolysis, and that was the whole idea behind using it in worms and pursuing that as an avenue of research. And it was still based upon this original inspiration I had from Edgar Cayce, and that's where I was at that time. And so a lot of you at this point, I'm sure, are asking, what the heck is this idiot doing looking into psychic readings or getting information from psychics, for God's sake, as a foundation for scientific research? Is he absolutely desperate for any kind of therapy or idea he can get, or is he just a crackpot, or what? So I guess I should explain myself. And to understand that, I guess I'll have to tell the whole story with how I got onto the idea of the Edgar Cayce readings and using those as a basis for ideas regarding practical scientific research. So this takes us back to like 1996 or something, when I was all into alternative history or archaeology and things. I was all into Graham Hancock. I'll put the links to some of his books up there. I was reading the book called Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. And Graham Hancock is this guy, a really fascinating individual that he seems to spend, he's been spending the last 30 plus years of his life synthesizing unique ideas about prehistoric civilizations, for example, and then going around the world and seeing what evidence he can find to support that, and then he'll write books talking about what he found and things, and it really makes for interesting stuff, because it's not just somebody that sits on the couch and reads about things and comes up with ideas. He goes out and tries them and sees what goes around the world and sees what evidence there's to support things. And his big thing behind that book, Fingerprints of the Gods, was this idea that there was a prehistoric civilization that was a global civilization. So it was something, a civilization that had mastered traveling the seas and circumnavigating the globe, and had established this huge global network of civilizations with unified ideas and philosophy and science and technology. And part of his evidence was that there were inexplicable similarities in architecture across continents. He pointed out all these similarities in construction, in pyramids and things in South America versus pyramids in Egypt, and just all kinds of stuff. The book is just chock full of stuff like that. And his whole theory that he synthesized is that, yes, there was this unifying civilization that was behind all of it, like a parent civilization. And he kept trying to bring this back and saying, and all these myths and legends we have about Atlantis and this civilization of Atlantis that was so advanced and then sank beneath the sea, well, they were probably all talking about this parent civilization that was behind all of these others. And so the real thrust is, hey, there really was possibly an Atlantis, and we even have evidence for it, because there's these all this evidence of advanced technology used to construct monolithic buildings that even we couldn't construct today if we wanted, because a lot of the blocks are just stone blocks are too large to practically transport from site A to B. And he even got to the point where he was talking to these heavy crane operators in New York or something that basically were running some of the biggest cranes in the world, lifting some of the heaviest weights in the world. And he was talking to the guys about what was required to lift heavy weights, what were the constraints, what were the largest weights you could use, and then he threw some of these figures at them, giving them the weights of some of these contiguous stone blocks that were in these megalithic structures. He would ask them, if you have a block that's this large and this heavy, could you move it? How far could you move it? What would be required? What would be the constraints? And it was really fascinating. Basically, the conclusions that they came to, that he came to from all of that, was that it wouldn't be practically possible for us to even construct some of these buildings that were sitting there, supposedly constructed by these primitive civilizations. And his whole thrust was, hey, they weren't so primitive. They even had technologies we can't even fathom just to be able to construct this stuff. And not only that, it was like a worldwide pre-flood kind of civilization, all this stuff. But it's all really interesting and compelling, and it all kind of struck a chord within me, and it was fascinating reading back in the day. But one thing that really caught my attention was this claim. Well, this story basically is this account of one of the Egyptologists, or one of the researchers into the pyramids at Giza in Egypt. And I can't remember which researcher he's talking about. I don't think it was John Anthony West. I think it was somebody else. I'll have to go back and look and find out exactly who that was. And in the notes to the video or whatever, I'll try to have a link to whatever the relevant information is. But the point was, in this particular chapter of the book, he was talking about some of the hidden chambers and passages within the pyramid. And the point was that there was this one researcher that seemed to have a lot of ideas, original ideas about where other chambers would be, what kind of chambers there would be, what to look for. And he seemed to be working on information nobody else had. And what really caught my attention was that Graham Hancock mentioned that this scientist's entire career, from his education in grad school all the way through to his research he was currently doing, all of that had been funded by a specific organization called the Association of Research and Enlightenment. And I was thinking, why would an organization go to so much time, expend so much time and financial effort in training up an individual just to do some research? It's like they knew something. It's like they were looking for something, and they wanted their own man on the inside to be doing the legwork, and they believed it enough to expend huge sums of cash to finance this whole guy's career and his subsequent research. And I was like, what's up with that? So I go look up the association. Are they still there, the ARE? And sure enough, they are. But not only that, what they are is they're an organization whose only purpose is to promote the ideas and do original research based on the ideas and advanced technologies and therapies based upon the information that came from one man. And that man was a deep trance clairvoyant that lived in the early part of the 20th century. He died in 1945. And within his lifetime, he had given something like 14,000 psychic readings, but these weren't your typical type of psychic reading you'd think of, where you call up on the phone and they tell you, oh yeah, you have a brother and sister that does this and this, and they're like, it's like, oh wowie zowie, they're giving you all these facts they shouldn't be able to know and all this stuff. When we first think of the word psychic in common parlance, you think of something trivial, and even if there is something to it, it's like, who cares? You always have this impression of people that they're getting half-baked impressions and ideas, even if they are, doing what they say they are, and they aren't doing, what do they call it, cold readings or whatever, or doing back research on people and deceiving them just for the purpose of making some cash. Presumably, if there are some people that do get some kind of impressions, it always seems to be something vague and almost to the point where it's useless, especially when you're talking about the Foundation for Scientific Research. And yet, here's this organization that seemed to have really specific information, and it seemed to be a lot more detailed from this guy, and so I wanted to know more about him. And so I wanted to know more about Edgar Cayce and Googled on Edgar Cayce, or back then it wasn't even Google, I don't think, it's using Yahoo or something. But I found this, one of the top sites that came up was this guy who had this site devoted to the life and readings of Edgar Cayce. And the first thing it said on his site was, before you go any farther, if you don't know anything about Cayce, read these two books. And they were the two, some of the two best known, or the two best known biographies of Edgar Cayce. And so I was like, oh, okay, what the heck, I'll do that. And so I read the biography, There Is a River, by Thomas Sugrue, and then the other biography, can't remember the title right now, by just Stearn. And I'll try to put links up for those too. And that was my introduction to this guy. And there were some, Cayce was different. If you started reading about him, he was not your average psychic that was giving you this wishy-washy information that was just, you know, terse and just a few scraps of facts here and there. Instead, number one, he would give like these readings where he would just go on and on and on in this long, drawn-out logical discourse that would take pages and pages and pages of transcription for a given reading, and it will last like an hour and a half. And not only that, the intelligence and awareness and type of information he seemed able to access was just staggering. And for instance, his medical knowledge seemed to be just absolutely incredible. When he was in the trance giving the readings, not only did he have a seemingly complete understanding of all of the current schools of thought of the day, you know, osteopathy and then the normal type of medical science, he seemed to have all the knowledge of the best physicians in all fields. But not only that, he seemed to have a complete understanding of anatomy and physiology. And they even did this thing one time where a bunch of doctors, medical doctors, took him in where, see, in the medical schools at the time, they would have the exams for the people in med school to test them on their anatomy knowledge and physiology. They would have, basically, the professor would be behind a curtain, and the student would be on the other side of the curtain, and the professor would be asking them questions or something like that. And so what they did is they got Cayce in trance behind the curtain, and the professor didn't know about it. And he had, you know, the professor's quizzing him on all this stuff, and he ends up having this basically perfect score, you know, this perfect understanding of anatomy and physiology. And so that in itself was interesting. And the fact that he gave countless medical readings where he would diagnose people's problems, whether they're in the room or not. They could be hundreds of miles away. He would never have seen them before, and there would be no information to even look up on the individuals. But he would be able to time and again accurately diagnose internal problems or things like, you know, that would be impossible to establish even without surgery or whatever. And a lot of times there were things that where medical science had missed the diagnosis. You know, they had misdiagnosed things and missed what the real problem was. And Cayce, time and again, when he was in trance, would be able to just basically remotely view the person as if he could see them internally and immediately see everything that was going on and pinpoint exactly what the issue was. He'd be able to tell what caused it initially, like if a kid fell on the playground and fell on their spine and it caused some kind of spinal injury and that resulted in behavioral disorders or something or whatever, he'd be able to pinpoint the cause. And then not only that, he'd be able to prescribe effective solutions using treatments and therapies that people would be able to procure at that time. And a lot of times they would involve drugs and things that people didn't know about, and he would tell people how to make them if they didn't know what they were. And the point was, it's like, the claim was in these biographies was that all of this stuff was accurate. You know, it's like, so yeah, there were a few misses here or there, but by and large, you know, it's like 99% of all this stuff was completely straight up and accurate. There's no way a normal person could have even have known all this stuff and be able to diagnose all this stuff. And yet here was this psychic, you know, somebody you'd normally think would only be able to get sketchy information. Here he was getting this concrete, rock-solid information and hitting these diagnoses, you know, hitting them right on every single time. And, you know, what's up with that? So then I began to see, it's like, well, sure, if if this guy really did live like this and give all these readings like this, and if there were readings about things like prehistoric civilizations, archaeology, where to dig, what to look for, what buildings were originally used for, why they were built, how they were constructed, and if there was information about things yet to be discovered that would be really important, that was contained in these readings, well, I guess I could see how an organization would put forth the money to really find that stuff out and pursue that, and why it would be worthwhile and why it wouldn't be just, a frivolous endeavor. And so that's how I got introduced to the whole Cayce thing, and so I subsequently bought the entire Cayce readings on CD-ROM where you could search them, and that was awesome. Got the printed version where they're all in printed volumes organized by topic, and spent a good 10 years just off and on, studying Cayce, getting inspired by things. And what was compelling to me is that there were several instances where engineers and scientists would be going to him and getting readings about their work and about devices that would seem to be incredible to build. And apparently there were guys trying to build things like this, like supposed perpetual motion machines that were getting their energy from subatomic forces or God knows what, and to guys getting to research about the makeup of the sun and what was the temperature at different levels and what was the temperature of the surface of the sun and things, and astronomical phenomena and the makeup of the solar system, the universe, and all this stuff. And so there were scientific type readings, and here and there, that's another thing that was interesting. Not only would Cayce prescribe therapies that would be more conventional, that we could understand for things that could be healed, often there would be things where we would think it's an incurable disease, and he would show how it could be cured, or at least it could be helped to a far greater degree than we would ever imagine. There was all these compelling little tidbits like that, where, hey, this really isn't an incurable disease, or hey, you really can beat cancer, all the time, and you can prevent it all the time, and hey, rejuvenation is really possible. And the thing that about rejuvenation therapy was that it tied into Cayce's account, because people would have readings about the past and ancient history and things like that, and past lives and all this stuff, and of course, so that spilled over in a lot of those readings. There was these hints and tidbits about this prehistoric civilization and the types of things they could do. Not only the types of things they could do archaeological or with constructing buildings and things, but what types of things could they do medically to help people, and what kinds of diseases could they cure. And apparently, according to Cayce, in several readings, he made mention of the fact that not only in this ancient Atlantis, but even later on in Egypt, which apparently was one of the places where the main civilization from Atlantis moved to, in all these areas, the upper class had available to them rejuvenation therapies that really worked. And he had some radical claims, like some of the rulers in the kings of ancient Egypt actually did live like thousands and thousands of years, because there's records, like they have the ancient kings in Egypt. I can't remember which of the books they are, whether it's the Book of the Dead or something else, but there's this place where there's records about how long the reign of each king lasted, and supposedly, and it's known that the gods that made up the pantheon of ancient Egypt, most or all of them were actually historic rulers, that later on became gods in the people's minds. But so for all of them, the length of their reign is listed, and when it comes to Thoth, who was apparently supposed to be a ruler way back, the god Thoth in the Egyptian pantheon, his reign supposedly lasted something like 14,000 years. And according to Cayce, those numbers were pretty much right on, and those people were able to live that long because they had access to advanced rejuvenation therapies from this prehistoric civilization. And that was, this is the kind of thing that gives you goosebumps, not only that, some people did ask about more particulars. How were these therapies achieved? What types of things were they doing to get people to live longer? And there were some interesting answers. And the most compelling thing I had found was this account of the Great Crystal, which apparently was some type of solar pumped infrared laser, among other things, that they would use for a number of different types of therapy. And one of those types of therapy was involved extending lifespan. And he claimed that certain people had come back and they used it again and again and again and tremendously extended their lifespans. And that really got me going, because it's like, what if it was true? You know, what if this guy really was talking about this previous civilization that really did exist, and they really had found some type of technology that did work, and they were using it. And what if it really did involve something like an infrared laser, you know, and what if that could be used to just radically, you know, like a magic bullet, extend a lifespan? You know, maybe there, at the time I was thinking, maybe there's like just one thing that's really holding everything up, and if you just get rid of that, then boom, the body will like keep rejuvenating itself, and everything will carry on. So that's what I was really looking for at the time. It was like a magic bullet. And it's based upon the reading or two that there was available on that topic of that particular therapy from Edgar Cayce. It seemed like, especially when I came back, you know, later in my research and read it after like a year or so, it seemed to be that my best bet was selective photothermolysis of lipofuscin using a pulsed infrared laser. Infrared, because that would be what was required to penetrate deeply, and also it seemed like in this reading of Cayce's, he kept talking about how it was heat, and like heat from the sun and stuff. Well, the heat rays are the infrared rays, and so it all seemed to like tie together. And so that's where I was going on. And the whole time, you know, when I came up with this project, and it, you know, to me it's like, it's not a question of blind belief. You know, it's number one, yes, it seemed to be just incredible what Cayce could give readings on, and it really did seem like he had access to, you know, paranormal abilities to see things remotely and see microscopically and internally within people and see their ailments and prescribe things, and knowledge of therapies and history and all this stuff. It just seemed incredible. But as with everything, you have to take it with a grain of salt. It's like, okay, maybe it was some elaborate hoax, and maybe they succeeded in pulling the wool over everybody's eyes and have fooled everybody since. And sure, it could be just complete bogus, you know, garbage. And so that's of course why I had to take the idea and then go do the legwork, go look things up, see what kind of research has been done. Is there anything to support those therapies? That's why I have to find things like these papers on selective photothermolysis, and really kind of establish a mechanism. How could this work? And, you know, find the work of like Brunk and Terman, where they're talking about their theory of lipofuscin and how it's foundational in contributing to the aging process. And yeah, so at least then I could synthesize a hypothesis where it's like, okay, here's how it could work. If lipofuscin is this key roadblock, and if getting rid of it will basically just let people live indefinitely, if it's as simple as that, and if we have this therapy that can safely remove lipofuscin from almost every cell and tissue in the body, then sure, maybe that's the hypothesis. You know, the hypothesis is that's how it could work. That was the therapy, that was the technique. So what do we do to test the hypothesis? Well, we got to do some experiments. Number one, can we destroy lipofuscin safely using this technique? And that's where I was at with this experiment with the worms. And then, of course, number two, if we do successfully destroy the lipofuscin safely and keep the levels of lipofuscin granules down, does that have an effect? Does it help increase maximum longevity? And so that's where I was at. That was my best bet, and that was the whole stimulus to do the research. So that's where I was going with the whole thing until in like the summer of 2009, actually right about when the whole promotion for this project was going on, and you people were donating money, and the fundraising was going on for Immortality Institute. During that time, while I'm sitting there waiting, I had actually learned more and discovered more about this deep trance clairvoyant type process. So more particularly, up until that point, up until like the spring of 2009, I had firmly, my understanding, along with that of most people that know about Edgar Cayce, my understanding was that his ability was unique, and no one else has come forth since then demonstrating similar abilities, and it was a one-of-a-kind thing, and we got the readings that we got from him, and that was that. Well, one thing had led to another, and basically what happened was in the spring of 2009, I was sitting down thinking one day, and all of a sudden this idea came to me. It's like, well, hey, here's one thing you could do to see if there was anybody else. Really, just do a search for a name, because Cayce gave this name one time, which was interesting. Early on, because his family was all religious, they were like Presbyterians and stuff, and it was just like they couldn't accept this whole thing. And in one of the earlier readings that his family had gotten about where the information was coming from, they asked, well, where does this information normally come from? And he said, well, it comes, first of all, from the superconscious mind of Edgar Cayce. And then that begs the question, what is the superconscious? And he outlined this whole thing where at this deep level we were connected to basically the infinite intelligence of all that is, God, the universe, each other, whatever you want to call it. And so basically he outlined this simplistic picture where you have the conscious mind, you have the subconscious mind, where it's kind of the sponge that stores everything that happens to us in our entire experience. But then he said beyond that, you have this superconscious mind, which is kind of like the Great Link or wherever, where you're connected to everything. And that was the short answer. But the reading had said there were exceptions. Sometimes a particular entity would be communicating, and it wouldn't be just like contacting a dead person. An elevated celestial entity would be communicating. And they said something like, well, is this one of those times? And he said, yes. And so then they said, well, who is speaking right now? And the name he gave was Halaliel. And they asked, well, who's Halaliel? And he says, well, I'm an advanced being. I guess according to your understanding, I am similar to the person you call Jesus Christ, but I am a similar type of individual to other people or something. He was trying to use apparently terminology that the religious, that religious group would understand. And so some type of advanced spiritual entity, whatever you want to call it. But what I was thinking of in the spring of 2009 was, well, hey, if he gave a name like that, and if that name really was an advanced spiritual entity that did communicate through this deep trance process from time to time, and if there were others that did communicate like this, then maybe that same entity would communicate through them once in a while. So, and maybe if there's information about them on the web, maybe it would be out there. So that's what I did, is I think I did a Wikipedia search for Halaliel, and boom, the first thing that led me to was Paul Solomon. And who's Paul Solomon? Well, all of a sudden I discovered this guy that was apparently a deep trance clairvoyant, very similar to Edgar Cayce, who gave the same type of readings, and he lived from, basically he gave readings from the early 70s on into like onto his death in 1994, or late 93, early 94. And I was like, wow, it's like a modern day Cayce, and I just missed him, because this was like 2009. So I discovered that whole thing. They have a great website for Paul Solomon where they have a ton of his readings up there that you can just read for free. And of course they've got printed versions of his readings that they're doing like a complete set, working from the latest ones on back. And they're on like volume 3 of that, I think by now, and you can buy those in like PDF form on CD-ROM, or I think you can do a download, and you can also buy them in printed form. And Paul Solomon just had, a ton of fantastic readings. His, a lot of times the Cayce readings could be kind of obfuscated and unclear. It seemed like Cayce didn't have the greatest vocabulary in the world. Anyway, here was Paul Solomon, who was the product of our modern, 20th century educational system, and apparently he did great in school. I don't think he had an advanced degree. He might have gone to a seminary or something, but he didn't have like any advanced scientific degree. But he turned out to be someone who was, fairly well versed in science and information, were fairly well read, had a really decent vocabulary, and that apparently contributed to this process of being able to go into trance, connect with this other part of himself, and to give these readings. Apparently a big part of that is the vocabulary and information that the person consciously has. It seems to be kind of like the raw material that the information has to work with when it's trying to communicate. And boy, when you read those readings, they're like so much more clear and direct and just amazing, So that was a jaw-dropping experience. And one thing just led to another. I went from discovering Paul Solomon and Andrew Jackson Davis to discovering Douglas Cottrell in the fall of 2009, who is still alive, and he's still giving readings, and he's one of these types of deep trance clairvoyance. And then it really hit me. It's like, oh my God, I could actually go to the same or similar source of information as that source. Here I was working on these old readings from like the 30s or 40s that this trance clairvoyant Edgar Cayce had given, that had given me these initial ideas. Here was a chance for me to go ask about the same information and clarify some things, see what it had to say. And again, it's not a question of blind belief, but it's a question of, hey, if there is anything to this at all, maybe there's some more valuable insight I could get that would really save me a lot of time, so I'm not wasting time pursuing blind alleys because I missed something or there wasn't enough information or whatever. So that's what I did. I actually scrounged together the $500 to pay for a reading from this guy and drove all the way to Canada, where he lived, to get the reading. And I've got the complete transcript of that reading. I've got the audio and then the typed up transcript on YouTube and on Google Docs. I'll put the links to those as well. So for those of you that are interested, you can see what he had to say. But that's one of the main things I did, was ask about that very thing. Here's what I knew about the research. Here's what I had discovered from what Paul Solomon had to say, because Paul Solomon had a ton more to say about rejuvenation therapy. And Douglas Cottrell had a bunch of readings up there that I had listened to regarding rejuvenation therapy. And so in that reading, basically, I'm asking him, I'm saying, here's what I know so far. Here's what you've said and others have said so far. And here's the research I've been doing based upon this Cayce reading where he said this, and I basically finally asked him, is Cayce describing a pulsed infrared laser? Is it really being used to remove lipofuscin? Is that effective therapy? But more importantly, I was asking, what type of, how much of an effect can we expect to get from these different therapies? Will this get us like 10 or 20 extra years? Will it give us an extra 1,000 years? What will it make us last indefinitely? What can we expect? And his answers to those questions were absolutely profound. And basically, in a nutshell, the message was, yes, I was on the right track. However, that particular aspect, using the pulsed infrared laser to remove aging pigments, was one small part of a very large group of therapies that they were using to tackle the longevity problem, to tackle the rejuvenation problem, the aging problem. And he started to go into that. What were the major factors that they had discovered regarding aging, regarding what therapies had to be in place, and what were they doing to solve those problems? And so the answer to my question, using the therapies we knew about from Paul Solomon and this therapy I was trying to pursue based on Edgar Cayce, what could we expect? And the answer was the best you can hope for was basically to get somebody to live 10 times their age at puberty. So if they entered puberty at 12 years old, they could live to be about 120. If they entered puberty at 14, they could live to be about 140. But that gives you the ballpark. And that right there took the wind out of my sails, because I was hoping for this magic bullet that would be a simple therapy we could use that would basically extend the lifespan indefinitely. And it wasn't there, and furthermore, the answer was not that just zapping lipofuscin will get you to live that long. The answer was really doing these other things, like Paul Solomon had mentioned, would get you to live that long. Because the claim that Paul Solomon made in many of his readings was that the main reason most people in society, in modern society, don't live their full lifespan, and presumably he was apparently talking about that 120 year or 10 times your age of puberty type of lifespan. The reason most people don't even get there is because of, mainly, he said, he mentioned a lot of other things, but one of the main causes that we don't know about now was the effect of stress. And he pointed out how every thought you think, particularly every stressful thought you think, results in a microscopic muscular contraction somewhere in your body, usually along the spine, somewhere. And he said this is a cumulative thing. So when you think a stressful thought, or you're stressed out about something, or a million things like we usually are, all those things are contributing to this microscopic stress. And the result is you get like these capillaries and things, or microscopic musculature that contracts and stays contracted. So not only is it cutting off blood flow while it's contracted, it's cutting off the flow of just energies in general, because in their approach of New Age medicine or whatever, they have this whole other perspective, more along the lines of acupuncture and things, where there are lines of energy that are going throughout that are following like the nervous system and the circulatory system, but also they have other effects, additional effects in cellular communication and rejuvenation and all this stuff. And so his whole point was that this contraction of these muscles was restricting the flow of energy, of blood flow and things, and that was cutting off the supply of nutrients and oxygen or whatnot to various other areas of the body, and that was having a detrimental effect. And furthermore, he claimed that as the muscles remained contracted, you'd have a lot of extra free-floating calcium start to float around. Calcium ions are involved in that process in cells, in transduction of signals, and I think muscle contraction and stuff. But the point is, he would say that you would end up with a lot of free-floating calcium ions that would then start to precipitate and form microscopic crystalline deposits around the muscle cells and contribute a lot more to inflammation, to restricting the flow of energy and blood flow. And this was a cumulative thing, because for most people, a lot of the stress that they underwent was not resolved, so a lot of that tension was still there, and it just kind of accumulated. And he said as we got older, we're just basically accumulating all of this this contraction and the formation of crystalline deposits that in the end is killing us way ahead of our time. And that wasn't the end of the story, according to Paul Solomon. According to Paul Solomon, there were some simple therapies we could use to directly release all of this tension, release the muscular tension, and also to break apart these crystalline deposits that were causing problems and also causing things we know about, like rheumatoid arthritis and things. he claimed that a lot of these autoimmune disorders like that, where the immune system starts attacking skeletal joints and things, and he claimed that the formation of these crystalline deposits was also involved as starting the problem and stuff. He claimed all of these things could be reversed. And so here we're talking about things that we don't think can be reversed, like arthritis. For example, he's claiming there are some simple therapies you can use to reverse this process. And the main therapy he kept coming back to was what he called the profound relaxation therapy. And he had this profound relaxation experience table. I think the PRE, profound relaxation experience, I think that was like a brand name they cooked up with early on, because there were some guys in the 80s that were working on building these devices and marketing them and whatnot. But so the idea behind, so they called it the PRE table, and it was basically just this table that you got, it was a waterbed that you got to vibrate with music. You would play music and sounds through it, and that would result in vibrations that were intense yet pleasing to the body, and also that your system didn't adapt to. So he claimed that if you just get a normal vibrating bed or a vibrating chair or something that's a mechanical, repeating, simple type of vibration, that your body will very soon adapt to it, will get numb to it, and basically counter the effects and negate the effects of that, similar to alpha blocking, where if you play a certain frequency of sound, eventually your brain will just start to block it out. It'll actually produce the opposite signal to block that out, and it does this at a subconscious level. And apparently not only would you get this mentally, but the entire system could do something similar, and it would negate any beneficial effect of vibration therapy, or most of the beneficial effect. And the way around that, according to Paul Solomon, was to use a continually varying signal, and even better yet, a continually varying signal that was constructive and positive and pleasing and harmonious, something like playing classical music or something through your table, and using that music to vibrate the waterbed and vibrate which would translate to vibrating your skeletal system, vibrating these joints, vibrating these microscopic crystalline deposits. And so not only would there be a signaling function where it would signal the cells to basically turn around and rejuvenate the system the way they're supposed to, but it would also serve a function of breaking up tension, releasing tension, and breaking up these microscopic crystalline deposits. And he basically said that threefold or multifold approach to using vibration sound therapy to basically let someone lay on a bed for like a period of 20 minutes 3 times a week, or for different people and different uses, he would prescribe different amounts. It would enable the person to profoundly relax, and it would get rid of this tension and have just all kinds of far-reaching therapeutic effects. Like another example he said was that if you get like a chiropractic adjustment, that if you get the chiropractic adjustment and just walk away, well, the effects are going to wear off fairly quickly and you'll be back to where you started. If you get the chiropractic adjustment and then you spend like 20 minutes laying on the profound relaxation table, well, he claimed that that would multiply. So basically the effects of that therapy, that chiropractic adjustment, would last like 4, 5, 10 times or more longer, just by spending like 20 minutes on the table afterwards. And that was the general idea, that it would just promote healing, promote all kinds of beneficial effects, and a lot of those having to do with extending the lifespan, apparently at least up to the point where we should be living normally, our 120, 130 years or whatever. And my reading from Cottrell seemed to definitely support that. And that really got me thinking, so not only, they kind of took the wind out of my sails where I was expecting some magic therapy that would give us thousands of years. But also what it did was it really seemed to demonstrate to me, look, you don't have to You don't have to pursue these strange, difficult, esoteric therapies with expensive lasers and treatments that it'll be difficult to get it to penetrate to deep tissue, and it's dubious as to whether or not it will be even useful as a therapy for humans because of the problems involved like that. Here's something simple you can do. You can just make like, this vibrating sound therapy bed and play your music through it and get that music to vibrate the person, and as simple as that, you can have all these beneficial health effects across the board, and additionally, you'll get apparently this rejuvenation effect if it's used like throughout the lifespan, is what he's claiming. So the earlier you start it, the more regularly you use it, the better from that standpoint. So I was like, well, this is something immediately practical. We can immediately start using this on people and measuring the effects. It's not anything harmful, anything where you have to do trials on animals and things first. And it seemed like we could just immediately start helping people instead of swimming around like little fish in a bowl trying to find some therapy that may or may not pan out 10, 20, 30 years in the future. Here's something that apparently would be just as effective, if not 10 or 20 times more effective, and we could be doing it right now. And another thing that just kept me going on this was Paul Solomon. He, over and over, from reading after reading, he kept saying again and again and again, look, this type of therapy, sure, it's going to take you a while to get it perfected and to keep tweaking it and getting it to work better, but it's going to start you down a road that is going to completely change your paradigm in medicine, where you're going to be able to see that you can get the body, with a little stimulus, with a device like this, you can get the body to heal itself way better and way faster than all of your drugs and all of your surgeries and existing therapies that you're using right now to treat all these conditions like cancer, heart disease, all this other stuff, you name it. And don't get me wrong, if you read Paul Solomon's health readings, there were lots of cases where a tumor would have gotten to the point where he's like, look, you have to go get surgery and get this taken out now. And he wouldn't be telling people, pursue the new age long-term approach. And if people needed heart surgery or something immediately, that'd be the first thing he'd tell them. So he did recognize the practicality, where there is a place for all that stuff, where things do get to the point where they are bad enough that the person's going to die if you don't do these drastic treatments immediately. But his other point was, if you use these other types of therapies early enough on and regularly enough, you'll never have those problems get that bad in the first place. Your cancer, your heart disease, all that stuff will never even get that bad in the first place. And with the appropriate type of signaling and stuff, you can tell your body to address these problems. It's fully capable of doing it. And heck, if you have problems swallowing that for cancer, all I've got to do is point up the mouse. The mouse they found that was just immune to any type of cancer, and his immune system would just take it out, and they load him up with like 10 different types of cancer at once, and he'll get all swollen up with all these tumors, and then boom, a week later they're gone because his immune system took them out. Compelling evidence that our immune system is capable of doing this. It just needs the right signal. It just needs the right stimulus to do it. There's some reason why it's not getting the message. And here we are trying to work around it, outside of it, do all these external types of therapies, when apparently we have the ability to take care of the problem internally. It's just a question of, why isn't that happening? What do we have to do? What types of signaling do we have to give the body to get it to do what we want it to do? And apparently, when it comes to anti-aging medicine and rejuvenation therapy, to a large extent, the same theory applies, the same philosophy applies. So that's kind of why the wind got taken out of my sails regarding this laser therapy on the worms. And I think that's why it's been so hard for me to, I'm trying to get all this set up, get the lab set up. I got, stuff going back behind me, and I'm trying to go to the warehouse sale at the university here at Iowa State, where they're selling scientific equipment, and get stuff put together, gradually getting it going. But, I can tell it's like my heart just isn't in it. And I keep thinking, why? What's going on here? Well, I can tell you why. It's like there is this other avenue of research that I'm convinced is going to be so much more effective, and I really feel like that's where we need to be researching. This is where we need to be trying stuff out, and it can be immediately effective, and boom, that's where my motivation is. You know, heck, I've gotten 2 paychecks so far in this recent time period when you guys have been directly funding this research. You got the money back from SENS. And so the scientific budget, I've gotten equipment based, you know, from that $400 each time was devoted to equipment. That's what that's gone into. But in addition, I've been taking the actual salary money and turning it into the research. I mean, the first $2,000 I got had to go into getting a car because we had no car, and that was with 2 kids and stuff, and having to take kids to school and go to work. That was a more pressing issue. But the second paycheck, when that came through, this is where it went. This is a $2,000 tactile vibrating sound therapy bed. I've moved way beyond the technology where they use loudspeakers. I'm now using tactile transducers, and I keep, you know, with every time around, this is my 2nd incarnation. I've got all kinds of ideas for trying the 3rd. I'm getting way better results every time as far as the clarity of the vibration, the range of the music you can play through and get translated to the body. And this is important. You know, Paul Solomon claimed in at least one of his readings that I recently ran across, he claimed that in order to get rid of these microscopic crystalline deposits, which are a critical part of the problem, especially regarding aging, in order to really tackle those, you've got to get the powerful vibrations. So basically he was telling the people, you've got to find as much as you can stand, you know, and your table has to be able to create more than you can stand so that you can find that point and then go down to a level that you can, you know, basically the maximum level that you can comfortably feel and undergo the treatment without causing discomfort, and use that. So basically use the most powerful vibrations that you can comfortably handle, and that's the level you need, he claimed, in order to get rid of these microscopic crystalline deposits. So that's what I've been working on, and I'm still not to the point where it's more than I can stand. You know, it's way more than I've ever felt off of a normal loudspeaker, but still, we're not to the point where I'm saying, no, this is an uncomfortable vibration. In fact, you lay on the thing, you're like, ooh, that's great, I want more. You know, I want more, because it's like, you know, back rub or something that, and you want more intensity. You can feel it's helping, but it just feels like it could help so much more if you could get, you know, 2 or 4 times as much or whatever. So that's what I'm working on, and I'm gradually arriving at how to use the existing technologies like tactile transducers and moving large-scale moving voice coils, like for machinery and things, how to use those to get up to the level of vibration, but at the same time, that vibration is coming from music. It's a musical signal. It's the waveform that is the audio waveform that is actually moving you and vibrating you that's directly getting translated to your system. So this is where my interest is at. This is where I poured the money into. My time and effort has been going into this, and I'll tell you what, this is the decision I've come to. I am not going to waste any more time on an avenue of research that I don't think is going to be nearly as effective, and definitely not as immediately effective as something that we can be using right now. You know, if you want anti-aging therapy to give you that extra 20, 30 years in the short term, in the near term, this is it. You know, this isn't some stupid miracle drug that there's no evidence for. I mean, as far as I can tell at this point, it's been doing everything he says it's going to do. I haven't been able to do tons of research just using it on myself or whatever, but a few things I can tell you are, hey, I used to have back problems like all the time, and my back used to be really sensitive. It would get injured a lot. Ever since I started using this thing, I've never had back problems again. Even though like I had to go like 9 months without using it because I built one, gave it to my mom, and it was like 9 months before I got the money to be able to build the 2nd generation. Even though, so in all that time, it's like, and it's a hard thing to explain to people. You know, it's like, I know what I was like when I was a teenager. You know, how I could do all sorts of things, it wouldn't hurt my back at all, and it just wasn't a problem. But then I know what it was like when I got into my 20s, and I started to have major back issues a lot, all the time, and I'd be really careful. I'd be careful about things that would hurt my back and wouldn't. And when it did get injured, I'd be out for a long time. Some days I'd be bedridden for like 1 or 2 days and wouldn't even be able to get out. I'd have problems where ribs would go out of place because my vertebrae would get dislocated and they'd take ribs with them. They'd start poking into my lungs. I couldn't breathe without excessive pain. My mom used to have the same problems. You know, it's like a genetic thing. None of that. I've never had any problems with that. My back has been solid. I've gone through several moves since then where I do all the work, I do all the heavy lifting, and it's like I just can't do anything to hurt my back. If I do get injured or feel something, it's gone in like a day or two. And that's something I can point to that's concrete and immediate that I know this does. And I'm not even using, you know, this isn't even an optimal device, and it's been able to do that for me. And who knows what other beneficial effects it's having for me. The claim is that it's a lot more, and I'll believe it. You know, it feels healthy, it feels therapeutic when you're on the thing, and I can very well believe that I'm getting some rejuvenation therapy right now that as long as I keep using this thing, it's just going to continue to enable me to get to that point. You know, so I've only started using it since I've been in my late 30s here, so maybe I'll only get to see 110 instead of 130 or whatever, but hey, you know, who cares? That's like 30 more quality years or something that is probably quality lifespan that I'm going to be able to get and enjoy and do things with. And sure, maybe discover even more therapies to push things longer that I wouldn't have if I wasn't using this device. So I'm convinced that, at least to the best of my knowledge at this point, I don't care where the idea came from, this is a real device that has real effects, and it seems to be very highly effective. And if it's even a tenth as effective as this guy Paul Solomon, as his readings, as they say it was, then it's going to be definitely worth it. And if it's as effective as he claims that it can be, then I believe it truly is going to completely change a medical paradigm as to what we think the body can heal by itself and how you can get the body to do that and how much more effective that is than our conventional medicines. So the decision I've come to in the last day or so is that I am going to be spending my time pursuing this avenue of research. I'm not going to be spending my time pursuing the worm research. Now, I understand that a lot of you people, and you know, everyone that donated money to my worm research project did that understanding that that was the project that was going to be done. But I also understand that everyone that gave money to that project gave it in the hopes that an effective rejuvenation therapy could be arrived at that would be hopefully useful in the near term, that we could really use to get that extra time to help us discover more or just do whatever else we want to do with our lives. Give us those extra few decades. If that was what could be discovered, that would be more than enough. I'm sure everyone that donated money, they would be more than happy if they could have gotten an extra 10 or 20 years out of that therapy. And I'm telling you people, that 10 or 20 years is far more likely to come from this new technology, from the profound relaxation, sound, tactile vibration therapy, using music through the body as both a signaling and a directly therapeutic remedy. That I'm convinced, at least that seems to me, based upon everything I know up to this point, it seems to be the most likely to turn into a real therapy that we can use. And it seems like it already is a therapy. And if you just start using it, it's going to be effective. So it's almost like we can all benefit from it while we're doing the research to find out how to use it the best. And to me, that sounds like to me, I really feel that is the effective use of my time. I just cannot, in clear conscience, waste time, waste the effort and money that you people have put forward to do something that I don't think is going to be nearly as fruitful. So I leave it up to you. If you people want me to just refund the money that you've given so far towards the worm project, I can do that. You know, as soon as I'm able, I'll pay back the $5,000 or whatever it's been up to this point that's been given in this recent term since I left the Science Foundation to this project. But also, you know, whether or not that money is used to fund the project, this is what I will be working on, this vibration sound therapy. if you so desire, I can definitely use those funds to continue this, and we can contribute it to this more fruitful line of research that I think is really going to go somewhere, that I think really is going somewhere. But it's completely up to you. And I know that for longevity, for Immortality Institute, it makes things a little bit complicated for you guys because you've got people that donated for a specific project, and now it's like that project has morphed into something else, and so a lot of people that did donate to the original project probably wouldn't want that money to go to this other direction, and it's probably going to cause a whole bunch of headache and paperwork issues and stuff. But you know, I'm sorry, I thought that I could just sweep my thoughts under the rug and do the project like I said I was going to do it and be done with it, but it's really becoming clear to me that I just don't work that way. I can't do it. I can't waste all that time and effort pursuing something that I think is a really inferior secondary avenue of research when there's something right here, immediate, that I feel is so much more effective and so much more worthy of my time to investigate and establish its best therapeutic use. So that's where I'm at. And where we go, like financially with the project, or however you want to handle it, or retool it, or just drop the whole thing, or say forget about it, that's completely up to you people. And like I said, I'm fully willing to give back everything that's gone into it as soon as I'm able. That's no problem whatsoever. But that's really where I'm at. So as of this point, I am not wasting any more time on the worm project. I'm spending it where I think it's going to be much more effective, and that's what I have to do. So I look forward to hearing everybody's response. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion and yeah, who knows what in response to this. A lot of radical far out information, but hey, you know, my take on it is, if there truly is another dimension to ourselves, if we really do have abilities to tap into knowledge and understanding and information far beyond what we have in our normal conscious waking life, and if that information has already come forward from other individuals, and if it has indicated to us that there are concrete therapies that we can use that will be very effective, I think it's really up to us the burden is on us to put those to the test. Hey, if that's the claim, if it really could possibly be that way, I feel like I deserve it to humanity to try it out and see if it really does what these people claim it does, and see if it really can work out. And if we find out that no, it just makes you feel good and maybe helps massage your back a little bit and that's it, well, that's what we find. But I think we deserve it to everyone else to find out if it really can be what these other sources of information claim it can be. And of course, the implication, if we do end up getting concrete therapies from a psychic source or paranormal source of information, that should turn a lot of heads and really, make people approach this whole idea of, what is spirituality, what is the other side, and what is being psychic, or what is all this stuff. It should really get us thinking along those lines, because it appears that there's a lot of compelling evidence that there's a whole other dimension to ourselves that is worthy of scientific, rational explanation, and it doesn't have to be just the purview of old wives' tales or crackpots or people just looking for a cheap thrill or something. So that's where I'm at. I'm convinced there's a lot to this, and that's what I really feel, and in clear conscience, this is what I have to do. So I'll look forward to hearing from you people, and whatever you decide, I'm with it as far as what we do with the funding or how that goes. But that's definitely where I'm at. So look forward to hearing from you, and I'll try to post information all over the description for this video, so you can follow the links and look into all the different sources that I mentioned and stuff. So carry on.